Hey, what's going on guys? How is everybody doing? As the 77th director of the Wangsheng Funeral Parlor, Hu Tao is vital to the day-to-day Liyue funerary affairs. While Rex Lapis spends his days looking after Liyue in its lively state, you could say Hu Tao is the yin to his yang as she looks over Liyue and its dead. But don't let that fool you, she's not all dreary and depressing, she's quite cheerful and a prankster at heart. We'll be talking about the stats you should be prioritizing, how to build your artifact sets, what weapons she'll get the most performance from, and what talents you should focus on. We'll be judging these from a free-to-play level all the way up to an endgame primary hero. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. When you first look at Hu Tao's kit and try and figure out how to properly play her, it can seem a little bit intimidating and feel like there's a lot of micromanaging due to her kit adding damage restrictions based on both her max HP and her current HP. However, in my experience in the gaming world, I've learned that one of these is far easier and more important to control than the other, and the latter of these should be considered more of a bonus when you get in range rather than something that you always need to have active. See, it's like this. We definitely want to try and maximize the attack bonus we receive from Hu Tao's skill, which is based on her max HP. This is something we can fine-tune outside of combat and stay static for as long as we keep her artifacts and talents the same. However, when we look at the alternative way to increase her damage, which is dropping her current HP below 50%, which pertains to both her burst and her Ascension 4 passive, many will try, especially with her team building, to maximize the time she spends under 50% HP, and while that does in fact increase the damage she does, in other games I've noticed this trend as well, that players try and utilize every part of a character or card, in my case with Magic the Gathering, to try and make it good. And eventually with time, they learn that you don't need to make the entire card or character relevant 100% of the time. Instead, if you think about this extra feature as just that, a damage boost should you find yourself low on health, you'll find much more consistent success, rather than limiting yourself to trying to optimize her at low health, maybe not using a healer, or using suboptimal gameplay to get hit, then deal more damage only to find yourself in a precarious situation because you've left yourself with little HP. With all that said, I think most people will look at Hu Tao's kit and make the assumption that she's designed to be a pyro carry, and while you're certainly not wrong, don't forget that she also has aspects that lend to her also being able to play a sub-DPS role. Her Blood Blossoms can be used to inflict more passive damage while she's off-field, or can be used to reapply pyro similar to Zhongling's skill. But arguably more important, her ability to supply additional crit rate from her first passive ability to your entire team, except for herself, can equate to a total of 36%, which is essentially an additional artifact added onto your team for no effort at all. Hu Tao certainly has some tricks up her sleeve, so let's go ahead and take a look at her kit. Hu Tao's basic attack deals 6 consecutive strikes, with her 5th hit dealing 2 individual strikes. Her charge attack will consume a small amount of stamina, causing her to lunge forward, dealing physical damage to all those in her path. While the basic attack multipliers are quite high for a polearm user, because of her low base attack, these strikes won't do as much damage on their own as the exact same multipliers would on another polearm hero. So instead we look to her skill to aid in increasing her damage output. Guide to Afterlife will spark a transformation, initiating Hu Tao's Paramita Papilio state. Entering the state comes at the cost of 30% of Hu Tao's current HP. However, Hu Tao will receive an attack boost based on her maximum HP, depending on how high the level of her skill has been promoted. Paramita Papilio will also convert all of Hu Tao's damage to pyro damage, which cannot be overridden by any other elemental infusion. Chongyun's skill is an example of this. Entering the state also imbues Hu Tao with the ability to create Blood Blossoms when hitting enemies with her charge attack. These Blood Blossoms will deal pyro damage every 4 seconds, can only be applied once per enemy, and can have their duration refreshed, but only by Hu Tao herself. Upon leaving this state, either by its duration ending, Hu Tao switching to another teammate, or death, her first Ascension passive will trigger, increasing all allies in the party's crit rate by 12% for 8 seconds, which can be used to solidify the damage done by your supporting heroes while Hu Tao takes her well-deserved break, or can further increase the crit rate of your main DPS if utilizing her as a sub-DPS. We can't forget her ghostly little friend, who unfortunately gets the short end of the stick from Hu Tao's burst and is used as a weapon, dealing pyro damage in a large AoE. Each hit regenerates a portion of Hu Tao's HP up to 5 times. Damage and HP regeneration are based upon if Hu Tao is above or below 50% HP. This healing factor essentially makes Hu Tao an all-in-one hero, constantly going through a cycle of taking damage to increase her damage and healing herself with her burst. Don't let this fool you though, you still want a dedicated healer on your team. Don't forget about those supporting heroes. While under the 50% HP threshold, not only does Hu Tao's burst receive a damage increase, so does all of her pyro damage thanks to her Ascension 4 passive, increasing all of her pyro damage by 33% as long as she has less than 50% HP. For talent prioritization, both her basic attack and skill should be prioritized above her burst past level 6. Both will work in tandem to increase her overall damage. However, increasing her skill will relieve some of the stress that's put on your HP artifacts and substats to make up for Hu Tao's low base attack. So if you're close to the 400% attack boost limit, it makes more sense to invest in her basic attack, so for most players, I do expect it to make more sense to invest into her skill. Hu Tao's Constellations luckily aim to supplement the kit she's already been given rather than adding additional features, which make her a very friendly C0 hero. However, for those who want to go all out and use Hu Tao to her maximum potential, Constellation 1 will reduce the stamina cost of her charge attack to 0 as long as she remains in her Paramita Papilio state. Constellation 2 increases the damage of Hu Tao's Blood Blossoms, but also adds the utility of applying Blood Blossoms with her burst, further increasing her potential as a sub DPS / burst support. Constellations 3 and 5 are our typical skill and burst 3-level promotions. Constellation 4 further increases the crit rate Hu Tao can provide for her teammates by an additional 12% after an enemy is defeated, but only if they were affected by a Blood Blossom. And finally, her last constellation, Constellation 6, and this one is a bit of a novel. So when Hu Tao's HP drops below 25%, including a lethal hit, she won't die. Instead, her resistances will be increased by 200% and her crit rate will be increased by 100%, turning Hu Tao into a destructive powerhouse. As a pyro DPS hero, Hu Tao has very natural options for her artifact builds. A 4-piece set of Crimson Witch or a 4-piece set of Lava Walker should be the two sets you look at initially for Hu Tao. Now, these sets do work on slightly different axes, so you might be wondering in which circumstance would you go with each. Crimson Witch is the easier of the two to process. If your team comp is focused on triggering reactions with Hu Tao, Crimson Witch will be the superior set. Even though we can't take full advantage of multiple skill uses to increase her 2-piece set bonus like Diluc can, we still receive an extra 7.5% pyro damage bonus upon using her skill, and will receive an increase in damage to all of her reactions. Now, on the flip side, Lava Walker will be the better performer when using a comp that does just the opposite. Tries to trigger no reactions. A comp like this would consist of either Geo or Animo heroes filling out the roster with an additional 1 or 2 Pyro heroes. This way, the reactions we have, Crystallize and Swirl, will not remove the Pyro status on enemies, and we will retain the 35% damage buff we get from Lava Walker. While you could technically use this set on a reaction-based team, overall you would lose a significant amount of DPS since the reactions would remove the Pyro status. The hit that applies Pyro does not benefit from the 4-piece set bonus, the status already must be applied, which is why it's worse, especially compared to Crimson Witch in this scenario. Though even on this mono-style team, Crimson Witch is still reasonable, only falling slightly behind Lava Walker. So if you're looking to play both team styles, Crimson Witch should be the one you invest more into. A 4-piece set of Gladiator's Finale or Retracing Bolide are two other sets that you might see players stray towards since Hu Tao's main damage sources come from her basic and charged attacks. These sets do have a couple weaknesses though compared to the other pyro-based sets. First off, they will only increase the damage of Hu Tao's basic and charged attacks, not her Blood Blossom damage or the damage from her burst, although her basic combo will actually outperform using the latter two sets. Also, while most other heroes would really appreciate that 18% attack bonus, remember that Hu Tao's base attack is actually quite low, and that is the stat that this 18% affects, so it won't give as much of a boost as it would on other heroes. Whereas with Bolide, usually we would want to use this on a team featuring a Zhongli or other shield generator. However, since we're looking to play around with Hu Tao's health and it's actually beneficial for her to get beat up every now and again, having even more shield may not actually be as beneficial as it may seem. Hu Tao's stat priority may seem daunting at first because it seems like you need to eke out every little last bit of HP you can possibly get, but remember that her skill only allows a maximum of 400%. That doesn't mean that you have to hit that number for her to be good, and that number actually gets easier to obtain if you have weapons with a lower base attack, such as your 4-star weapons compared to a 5-star weapon. So looking at her main stats, we always want an HP percent timepiece. This is the easiest way to get a big HP boost and will always provide a bigger damage improvement over an attack piece. Next is her cup, where we do actually want pyro damage, which will provide a bigger damage bonus over HP. Lastly, her circlet. You could argue that you might want an HP percentage piece here as well, though I would only prefer that if you're still in search of a crit rate or damage piece, since crits are how we obtain those really big reaction hits and will be far more beneficial in the long run. Keep in mind that Hu Tao does have crit damage as her ascension stat, so it's more likely than not that you'll need a crit rate circlet since you already receive a boost in the crit damage department. Finally, we come to Hu Tao's recommended weapons. In first place, it's kind of a no-brainer, the polearm designed with her in mind, Staff of Homa. With a massive base attack, a full 66% crit damage, and a passive HP percent, and this is a lot of ands, an attack increase dependent on how much HP you have, further increasing if you're below 50% HP. Is that enough stats on a weapon? Following that up, Primordial Jadewing Spear is her next best option, and surprisingly, her next best choice is actually Dragon's Bane. While this weapon does fall off a bit when used on a Lava Walker team, I expect that to be the minority of team comps that players choose to play with her. The combination of additional damage upon hitting an enemy inflected with Pyro or Hydro status and the built-in Elemental Mastery will provide a very nice boost in damage to all of Hu Tao's damage. Just remember that this weapon does not count the hit that applies the status, so if using Hu Tao on a Melt comp, you won't be taking advantage of the passive ability, whereas you will if she's on a Vaporize comp. For 4-star and below alternatives, Deathmatch will be your best option, followed by Blackcliff Pole and Lithic Spear. Blackcliff Pole will shine if you can get a crit rate of at least 40%, but if you're struggling, you could also go with the Lithic Spear. However, because of the inconsistency depending on your team comp, it's more necessary to get further refinements so that the lack of leeway heroes, should you be short, plays less of an impact on your passive crit rate. For a budget alternative, White Tassel will be your best option as none of the craftable weapons are actually particularly good here. White Tassel is actually a better option in my opinion to either Blackcliff Pole or Lithic Spear, assuming you can still achieve high crit damage. Even though the base attack is lower than the other two spears, remember that we aren't using any attack percent multipliers to boost our attack, which would be calculated off our base attack. Instead, we're using HP percentages. Due to this, with the recommended artifact setup that we discussed earlier, we will still fall below the 400% attack cap, assuming no HP substats. So while having a higher base attack weapon will increase the cap to the attack we can gain, it's not exactly the easiest feat to achieve, which is why a 3-star weapon can work so well in this certain scenario. In conclusion, Hu Tao is an incredibly fun, cute, and dynamic new pyro hero to add to your roster. She might only be able to do her maximum damage over a short period of time, but when she does, you better run or she'll put you in the ground just like all of her clients. Hopefully you guys have found this guide useful and it will help you in building your own Hu Tao. If you liked what you saw and you want to see more content from me, head over to my Twitch page, twitch.tv/xjazzy, or you can support me right here on YouTube by clicking the red subscribe button, like the video if you liked it, and hitting the notification bell, that way you never miss a video. And if you want to join our community over on Discord, link as always will be down in the description below. But guys, that's all I have for today. Hopefully you did enjoy, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.